welcome to our Fast Blade instruction. This is information that could save your life, so settle in and please pay close attention. Your Fight Fast instructors are some of the most feared and respected warriors on earth. First up, Glenn Boudry. This guy's the real thing. He provided personal protection to Hamid Karzai, president of Afghanistan. As you can imagine, this duty was Class 1 dangerous with numerous ongoing assassination attempts. Boudry has been a frontline team leader for Spec Op units during Operation Desert Shield, Operation Desert Storm, and Operation Enduring Freedom. Let's just say he sure knows what he's talking about when it comes to real-world fighting. So here's Glenn Boudry with some advanced fundamental knife skills, deterrence, how to use a knife to handle an unarmed attacker without killing him, and a lot more.
Okay, the first thing we're going to cover is actually carrying the folder or the knife. A lot of people, there's a lot of books out there, a lot of videos that are demonstrating different positions on the body to carry the knife. To be honest with you, the only place you can really carry it is where you can access it quickly. It can be, most people just carry it in their pocket on their strong side. A lot of people will carry it, and kind of what we recommend for law enforcement, a lot of military types, is actually to carry it somewhere toward the center of your body. But the important thing is that you can access it with either hand, with your right hand or your left hand. For example, if the attacker comes in and grabs, and you got to move, you'd have to be able to reach down, access it with your strong hand on this side, and be able to cut. If he comes in, he's grabbing for this strong side, and he's controlling this strong side, and I can't get to it, I've got to be able to access it with my weak hand and be able to get the knife out on this side. So the important thing about when you carry the knife, you have to be able to access it with both your left and right hands from a variety of positions. You have to be able to access your weapon, whether you're on the ground, on your back, on your stomach, from a kneeling position, standing position, and from a lot of the grappling positions that we're going to demonstrate a little later. But the important thing is, and the key element is that you're able to access it with either your right or left hand anywhere on your body. Obviously, if you're carrying your knife like a boot knife, or you're carrying it behind you, those are a little bit more difficult to get to. So what we recommend, just like when we're shooting, is that the knife is somewhere toward the midsection of your body to where you can access it. Now, unholstering the knife is the same way. We do this exactly the same way as when we shoot. Something we demonstrated in earlier tapes is we're square to our opponents. Kind of our instinctive reaction is to square off our chest, be flat-footed, bend our knees, lock our torso, and our hands instinctively will come up to the center of our body and out toward the threat. So what we're trying to do with that from this position is to be able, as if I had a weapon, as if I had a firearm, to follow those same motions that I'm going to shoot with and that I do empty-handed without a weapon, and be able to access the blade same way and be able to use the blade the same way that I actually shoot, in exactly the same way as if I were fighting with empty hands. So again, and if you notice, I like to carry my knife just in my pocket right here. But depending on when I've been on operations, I've always tried to keep my knife somewhere toward the center of my body. So from the same shooting platform that we use when we shoot, we're going to access it, and it's up. And if you notice, when I access it, I'm bringing my weak hand back, and I'm slapping myself in the chest when I access. And when I bring it out, I'm bringing my hands back together. The purpose of that, there's several reasons. One is if I'm trying to access and he sees that I'm going for a knife, so he starts to go for my knife, I need to be able to bring my hand down and access it so that I can actually use it. Another reason for that is that I'm getting it out of the way. I don't want to leave my hand out here when I'm accessing it. There's a chance of getting it cut. So what I'm going to try to do is bring it straight back, slap my body, and access it and bring my hands back together. It's a very natural motion. Plus, I need to get used to using this hand. A lot of times when the enemy comes in to attack me, I might be using this hand to hold him off while I access it, just so that I can get my weapon out and control him and clear this line to where I can get it out. The other thing you're going to notice is that when I access this blade, I'm going to always try to keep it close to my body, but I'm keeping the handle side tight and pulled against my upper body. I'm not keeping my blade in. I'm not trying to keep it moving around. I'm just going to try to keep the butt end of my blade tight into my body where I have control of it. Reason being is if I hold it out, you'll see a lot of times where there's been videos where I'll hold it out and he can end up just grabbing the knife, and you'll see this. And we don't want to end up grappling for this blade We don't want to end up trying to wrestle around for my knife. So what we want to do is we want to keep it tight to our body. The difference between this and a firearm, or even empty hands, is that based upon whatever state and local laws you have to deal with, this is very much just a self-defense tool, but it constitutes deadly force because it does cause great bodily harm and can cause death. So instead of advancing onto our opponent, when I access this, you ready, Ted? Okay, just stay there. If I've made the determination to draw and use my my blade for a self-defense tool, what I don't want to do is I don't want to draw it and then actually go after him. That no longer constitutes self-defense because now I've taken a lethal weapon and I've advanced on him and I can cause great bodily harm or death. That's not what we want. So even though when we've talked about the use of firearms, well, we're actually going to advance onto him, and even empty hands. Kind of give me a jab and a John Wayne. But when it comes in, I'm actually going to advance on him. Okay, that's a little bit different. We are actually, in order for me to safely get to this blade, I'm actually going to create some distance. Just stay there. I'm actually going to create some distance so that I can access it, because this is a self-defense tool. And if he makes the determination to run away, I've satisfied what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to protect myself, save my life. If he saw this blade and he doesn't want to come in after it and he runs away, that's good. But if he comes in, I do have a weapon that I can use to protect myself. So then it's constituted as legal self-defense. But we don't want to draw this weapon and go after him. Another important thing to remember is that it was with speed, tactical principle of speed. You could be the best knife fighter in the world, but if you can't quickly access your weapon and get it deployed to where you can use it, effectively use it, it's no good to you. So when you draw, as if you're drawing a firearm or any other type of weapon, you have got to access it quick and get it out. There's no, in real world self-defense, especially if he sees that I'm in motion to go for a weapon, the time it's going to take him to move from his position to me is probably less than about a second and a half. And so he sees, as soon as I go for this weapon, he's going to close that distance, and he's on me, and we're going to be wrestling for this knife. And what has happened in the past throughout the United States, even and particularly through the law enforcement community, is that officers had taken their time to get to their weapon or taken the time to get to their blade, and the suspect was able to close in on them, and they end up wrestling and grappling for their pistol or for their blade, and the officers end up being killed by their own weapon. So the important thing is to remember that when you are going to draw this, it has to be drawn quick. You have to get it up. But that is dictated on the distance and actions of the enemy. So I do want to create some distance. If I have the opportunity, and he's not holding me, but I have the opportunity to create some distance, I need to do that. And then if it's still justified in the use of this particular weapon for self-defense, then I need to access it quick, so that he doesn't have that opportunity to try to close on me while I'm trying to go for it. Another thing that works very well is if you have a vehicle or if you have furniture or anything that you can maneuver behind. For example, if we're standing next to a vehicle. As we're talking about this, I feel that the attack is imminent. But I've made the determination that I'm not going to initiate into hand-to-hand combat because maybe a bigger guy is obviously a tougher guy than me. And I don't want to get involved in a hand-to-hand combat struggle with him. So I want to create some distance so I can access my actual primary self-defense tool. So I need to maneuver around to try to get something between us. Then I can access it, but I have something that's protecting me, that's keeping him from getting close to me. Now, many times in real self-defense, once he sees that blade, he's not going to want to get close to me. It's one of the reasons a blade is such a good and effective self-defense tool. Another important aspect of using a blade is that you have to understand, very importantly, you have to understand what self-defense rules or what use of force laws there are in your community. For example, if Ted is not significantly bigger than me, or if I don't sense that I'm absolutely in jeopardy, because I'll talk about opportunity, ability, and jeopardy, and preclusion. If he doesn't have the opportunity, if he doesn't have the ability, and I am not significantly in jeopardy that justifies the use of deadly force or lethal force, I cannot legally access a blade for self-defense. So it's very important that you understand that. but along the lines with speed and distance. I've got to access my weapon quickly. To do so, I've got to create distance. I need to create that safe distance to where I can access it safely, to where I can actually use it. And then finally, we'll talk about positioning. I need to maneuver myself into a position that makes him feel uncomfortable, which buys me enough time and opportunity to safely access my weapon and get it deployed. The human animal is oriented at the 90-degree angles. Ted is oriented to the front, to his chest, and he will always square off to me. If I move to the 45, he will typically stay. If I move to the 90, he'll instinctively try to turn on me. Okay? Humans are not oriented to the 45s. It's a blind spot in almost their senses. So what we're going to try to do, once we access, right, I've determined this is a safe weapon to use. I'm going to access it, but I'm going to move to the 45. See how he's turning to me. He's playing catch up to me. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to zone to where he's not thinking of moving forward, but he's thinking that he has to turn. He's wondering where I'm going while I'm accessing my weapon. It buys me a few seconds. It buys me some time to get my weapon out safely, get into my good shooting platform, ready to protect myself. So, number one, you have to understand, you have to be able to access your weapon with either your left or right side. Get it out and open quickly so you're not taking your weapon out, trying to unfold it and get it deployed. And finally, you have to do it quickly, create distance, and be able to maneuver yourself to where you can effectively protect yourself with the edged weapon. Okay, what I'm going to talk about right now is actually cutting methods, how to cut using the edged weapon. There's several martial arts, Indonesian, Filipino, even Thai, a lot of Thai bladed system. Every culture has a blade system, even some of the South American cultures I've been involved with. But all of them have their particular way of cutting and slashing. Many of them, especially now, have a numbering system on how they teach, and it's just an administrative way to teach how to use the edged weapon. But it's a numbering system, and it's a good way to learn how to use the weapon. We're not so much concerned with that. From whatever angle I'm cutting from, it's just the available angle that's on my enemy. So I'm not necessarily concerned with whether it be an angle 1, an angle 2, an angle 5, an angle 8. It doesn't matter, because what I'm just going to cut for is whatever available flesh there is to protect myself. So we're really not concerned with learning various angles and things like that. Now, with an edged weapon, depending on the type of edged weapon, and I'm not going to go into different double-edged weapons, type of blades, whether they were dagger, a folder, it doesn't matter necessarily for the point of this video. So what we're going to do, we are going to talk about are the different ways to cut with it. Number one, we can slash with it, obviously. You can slash with a blade, okay? Slashing means, obviously, if he attacks me, I can slash. Slashing is just dragging this blade just across any part of his body that is going to cut. I don't necessarily, there's nothing necessarily fancy about how I cut. As long as the blade is touching him and I move it, it's going to cut him. That's slashing, okay? Second, we have tearing. Tearing is very common, and it's actually a very nasty type of injury. Tearing is when the blade comes out, and instead of slashing with it, the blade is actually turned and it tears. A lot of times, and even myself, when I've been cut with a knife, there have been cuts where it began as a slash and turns into a tear. Nobody's going to stand there and let you cut him, okay? As soon as that blade comes into play, they're going to start wrestling for it, trying to punch me, and so the different types of cuts. He may have a slash here, but he's going to have a tear here. So it's dependent upon the actions of your enemy and your body position and how you're trying to maneuver. So one more time, we have slashing. The blade comes out, just touches and slashes. And we have tearing, is where the blade itself turns and just kind of drags along the skin and tears the tissue. Next we have goring. Goring, just like the horns of a bull, is when the blade comes in and is hooking. Okay, and it doesn't matter if you're using the blade side, even the backside edge. It's just coming in. I'm not necessarily stabbing, but it's just goring and hooking along the tissue. It's called goring. Next we have stabbing. Obviously stabbing is just sticking the blade straight into the tissue. Okay? But the important thing to understand about when we do use a knife you try to isolate the amount of damage you do to the enemy or the person that you're protecting yourself against. You can't justify, if Ted grabs me with a single hand, I may be justified in turning and cutting just to release that, gain distance. That's protecting myself. But I wouldn't be justified if he grabs and just cut, and I just continue to cut him. That's difficult to justify in legal self-defense, why I cut him 30 times and all he did is grab me. So you really have to understand that we're just trying to isolate the amount of times we're trying to cut him, that this edged weapon is just used to escape and gain distance to safety. I'm not involved in a knife fight per se. It's a self-defense tool. And finally, you have to understand the other uses of the blade. Even with the blade not out, this is still a very good self-defense tool. So when Ted may grab, I can still use this if I access it and I don't kick the blade out, but I access the folder itself. I can smash into his arm. That might get him to let go. Okay, it's still causing that same purpose or that same reaction I'm looking for, so that I can get away. Okay. There are some schools of thought to try to justify these actions, these cutting actions legally, that you should access your blade and not take the blade out if it's a folder, and try to use it as an impact weapon to try to gain the same actions that you want. And if that doesn't work, then you access it, then you cut to get away. And I'm not going to tell you either way. The other school of thought is that once there's an activity, I realize this is a bad situation, and I decide I'm going to go straight for my blade, and I'm going to cut him to get away. But like I said, I'm not going to tell you either way. It's more of a situational awareness thing that you have to be able to understand that when you're in there and he grabs me, if I pull away, if I think, okay, I grab this, I try to kick it out, I can't get it kicked out all the way, maybe I'll give him a shot. Then maybe I'll kick it open and then maybe I'll cut. But you have to, the less motion that you're committing to, that once he grabs, if I kick off the line and I access it, get my blade out, and just cut him, that's less motion. But if he grabs me and I try to pound on him and it's not working, he's obviously going to change his attack. He may pull that hand away and just start hitting. But I haven't really done anything. If I was justified in kicking this blade out and using it in the first place, with him unarmed, it means he's obviously a badass that I'm really worried about. He's obviously going to cause me some great bodily harm unless I did access this to protect myself. So, wouldn't necessarily recommend just trying to pound on the guy to get him to let go. If you're justified in pulling this out, get it out, use it to escape and gain distance and protect yourself. But just quickly as a review, we have slashing, that's where we're just cutting with the blade. Tearing is when the blade turns. Goring, we're kicking the blade in to cut. Stabbing, obviously, and then we can use the butt of the weapon to hit with, whether it's open or closed. We can still hit. But it doesn't take away from the other techniques or the other empty hand techniques that we've covered. For example, if Ted comes in and grabs, and I access it, and I cut him, and he lets go, but we're still here, it doesn't mean I'm still not going to come in maybe and hit him and just start smacking him with this thing to get him to get away from me before I back away and gain some distance. So it doesn't take away from all the other empty hand techniques. This is more of a supplement to those empty hand techniques so that you can use this as an effective self-defense tool.
Next up is Dale Comstock. This man is the real thing. 10 long, bloody years in Delta Force as a surgical explosive expert and team sergeant on a Delta assault team. He was also an instructor for Delta's operator training course, teaching self-defense, including sentry takeouts, close quarter combat fighting, and expert weaponry. He was trained as a weapons expert in the Green Berets. A shy and super effective hero who kicks major league butt. Here's Dale Comstock.
Again, target areas with the knife, the entire body, but since we want to dispatch this person right away and not take the chance of just wounding him and have him come back and finish us off, I'm going to focus on the neck and the throat area because it's very vascular. We have the carotid artery that runs, carries blood to the brain. We have the jugular vein that carries blood or deoxygenated blood back to the heart. And by the way, cutting the jugular is not going to kill anybody right away. We hear, go for the jugular all the time in the movies, but you really want to go for the carotid artery. The jugular is carrying deoxygenated blood back to the heart, and really it's not going to do you any good. But the good news is the carotid artery and the jugular vein run parallel to each other, and they're right there, so you'll end up cutting them both anyways. So we're going to attack those blood vessels on the side of the neck. We're going to attack the trachea. If you ever cut a trachea on an animal or person, you'll know that it's actually very easy to do, and of course it profoundly affects his ability to breathe. The face is another good target area for a knife. Although you're not going to get a whole lot of mileage out of the knife in terms of penetration, because the facial bones and the skull, because the face is very vascular, all you have to do is start cutting the face, and you're going to draw a lot of blood. Especially if you start cutting above the eyes, you happen to get a swipe across the eyebrows, you're going to see a lot of blood. He's going to see a lot of blood again. It's going to hopefully unnerve him just enough to give you another psychological advantage in this process. If everything goes well, from start time to finish time, a knife fight should be over within a matter of about 3 to 5 seconds. If it progresses longer than that, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, or God forbid, 5 minutes, then you're doing something obviously wrong. It shouldn't go that long. You're giving him time to organize himself and develop his own or get more courage. So it should never go that long. Maybe 5 seconds, get in and get out. Other areas we can attack besides the throat, the face, the eyes, obviously, is the chest. We have the heart in the chest. We have the lungs. If you puncture one of the lungs, it'd be very easy to again, affect his breathing. He could collapse the lung. Of course, the abdominal area, we have the liver. The liver is not very pliable. In fact, it's not pliable at all. If you stab the liver, it's going to bleed profusely. He'll probably bleed out. You can easily gut somebody if you have a sharp enough blade. It doesn't take a whole lot. By swiping across the belly, you can easily open the belly up and send his innards on the floor if that's what if it's the desired effect you're looking for. You have the bladder. The bladder is right about underneath where the belt buckle is here on Eric, and it's about maybe 2 inches below that behind the pelvic area, but it wouldn't take much to penetrate the pelvic area and hit that bladder. And that's guaranteed to stop him in his tracks. Of course, then you also have the groin area that you can attack, and then the legs. I say the legs, not that you're going to go down and bend over and attack the legs, but you might find yourself in a situation where you're now on your knees or on your back, and that's the only target that you have at this point, is to attack his legs. You still have to concern yourselves with the weapon itself, but there's still some things that you can do down here. As I mentioned earlier, you can attack the groin, you can attack the back of the knee itself. You have the tendons that run along here. By slicing those tendons, he won't be able to stand on that leg anymore. You can attack the Achilles heel, right above the top of the shoe here. Attack that tendon. If you cut it, he will not be able to stand on that foot. In fact, you'll do irreparable damage. Once you cut that tendon, this man will never walk the same again for the rest of his life. Not to mention you've got various arteries that run down. You have the iliac artery that dumps into the legs, down to the femoral artery. The femoral artery runs on the inside. If you look at the pant seam, your own pant seam or Eric's pant seam, that's about where the femoral artery lies. It's just below that. It just runs parallel to the inside of the leg itself. So a good knife wound there can easily penetrate and cut that particular artery. And I can tell you from my own experience that it would take about less than 1 minute, if that, for a person to bleed out completely from the femoral artery and die. It's a very lethal wound, and it requires immediate medical attention if you should happen to get a wound there, including yourself. Of course, there's other target areas also: the knees, or in the front of the knees, the side of the knees, the calf itself. Those are all areas that are very sensitive, and by cutting those areas, again, you're destroying ligaments that are needed to manage and maintain control of those limbs.
On deck now is the highly respected Derek Smith. This guy was up to his eyeballs in super classified stuff the government sometimes has to do, most of which he can't even legally talk about. He has black belts in Hapkido, Taekwondo, with deep training in 7 other disciplines. Here's Derek Smith with some lethal tips on dealing with an unarmed attacker who, for example, is in your home threatening you or your family, when you can't waste time or risk wounding an attacker who's going to come back for you.
First technique on Bob is a vertical slash. With a vertical slash, I told you I want to go in most of the time. With a vertical slash, it comes down, it comes across to open Bob up. Okay? Now, it could be down or it could be up. Okay? I'm going to reach in, I'm going to tear meat, I'm going to tear skin, I'm going to drag it. Now, one thing with this knife is, and once again, I'm not reaching out with my arm. I'm using the same special agent combative concepts that I used before. I'm going to drag this knife down his body. I'm going to insert it, and I'm going to drag to open him up. Okay? So it's down, it's nasty, it's brutal, but I'm using my force to open him up. Okay? That vertical slash. Okay? If I come in this way, I'm going to tear up and out to try to open him up as much as I can, get to some of that thoracic cavity area. So you have your vertical slash up this way. Okay? This is a very, very deadly technique. All of them are deadly because we have a knife, but this is to take the person out. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take that knife in the same stance. I'm going to step in. I'm going to take it, I'm going to ram it on his throat. Vertical thrust. Thrust it into the throat area. Okay? Knife goes up in, does damage to his throat area. That's going to be irreparable. Okay? Also, it can go into the chest area. Once again, it's a vertical upward thrust. Turn this way. There's a vertical upward thrust into his chest. The reason I do that is because, number one, he's thick-chested. Number two is that when you have your weapon turned this way, it's hard to get it through the bones that are in the chest. So what I want to do is I want to try to ram under his sternum and take that knife up and under. So I'm going to jab it in, up, and under. So it can either be here, or it could be in, up, and under his rib cage to try to get to the heart. Okay? So what we have the slice, and we have the thrust. Okay? Now with the straight thrust, it comes straight in and thrusts into my partner's body. Okay? You see this a lot in prison films or on television. The guy's just thrusting the ice pick or the knife in. Okay? Hitting that kidney area, thoracic area, wherever it may be, chest area, but I'm going to thrust the knife in. Now, when I thrust that knife in, turn around, partner, I thrust in here, I turn, and then I cut across. Okay? This is an old Marine technique. The reason I do this is because I want to do irreparable damage to his body. I can thrust it in and it leaves a hole, that hole close up when I take the knife out. He may or may not die, depends on what internal organs I hit. But if I thrust it in, turn, and cut across, I'm going to gut him like a fish. I'm going to open him up. Parts are going to be falling out. Now, the slash may catch some vital organs. Also, he's busy with things falling out of his insides. So I thrust in, turn, and slash out. Thrust in, turn, slash out. Okay? Or just regular, just driving him in. Also, once again, when I thrust in, it's going to lock around the knife. So this is going to open that knife up, and it's going to tear out his gut area. Okay? Once again, they're not going to be able to fix this either. They're not going to sew him up and across. He's pretty much going to be taken out. He's out of the fight, pretty much going to die from this. As I told you, I'm sitting back, and this person is trying to hit me, trying to get my knife, or anything like this. Down and dirty knife fighting, once again, nothing pretty. He comes out with a punch. I want to block the punch. This hand is my live hand. It's always here. Keep him, or even if he's reaching for the knife, keep him out of the way. So what I want to do, he reaches in. I want to block. I want to thrust. Okay? Again, reach in, block, thrust. Tear it out. Okay? Reach in, thrust, thrust, thrust. You know, vertical thrust. Tear him out. Tear down that body. So I'm just tearing him up with that knife from the inside. Now, it's very important in knife fighting. One very important aspect. Get to your fighting stance, partner. He's in his fighting stance. You see that he has his left side towards me? That's how most people are going to face you in a fighting situation. As a knife fighter, it's very important for me to control the left side. I do this in this fashion. He reaches out to throw a punch with that hand. I want to turn him to control his left side. I control his left side because what does he have? What can he do to me now? If he tries to turn around, go ahead and try to turn with that weapon. I have control here. I also can now thrust that knife in and do damage the way I want to do damage. Be it the throat, be it coming down inside his carotid. But controlling the left side is very important. Now, if he's a right-hand fighter, we can get your right side. I'm sorry, the other side. If he's this way, go ahead and do it. I still want to control him because, look, I'm to the outside of his weapons. He can't get me, but I can get him. I go right up and in, right up and in. You know, not this pretty stuff that you see, just jabbing that knife in. That's all it's going to take to do the damage that I need to do, okay? Jabbing it under the throat. So once again, important concept in knife fighting. They don't teach you this in the Filipino martial arts and some of those other things. It's very important to control your opponents. Go ahead and reach out to me. Left side. Once I get to the left side, there's nothing he can do. He's all mine. I'm going to tear his ass out.
Up next is the world-renowned Paul Vunak. Vunak was trained by Dan Insanto, the master who was trained by the great Bruce Lee himself. Paul's a combat genius who's appeared on Black Belt magazine, and eventually they listed him as one of the, quote, 20 toughest fighters on the planet. Paul was hired by the Navy and dropped by helicopter into live fire combat zones to train Navy SEALs on the job site. 17 other government agencies sought Paul out to train their operatives too, including the FBI, DEA, Army Rangers, NSA, Spec Op, SWAT teams. Paul's a world-class instructor. He's held over 300 seminars and taught more than 10,000 students in the art of combat. Here's Paul on using a knife against someone armed with a knife or a stick.
Now, when we're discussing weapons, it's very important for you to understand that comparing weapons to empty hands is sort of like comparing chess to checkers. And when you have your weapons down, when you go back to your empty hand techniques, it becomes very easy. Let me give an example of what I'm talking about. Tom? Now, let's say, for example, Tom gives me the angle 3. The first thing he has to worry about is, boom, getting that hand smashed. Okay, again, please, Tom. So he gets the hand smashed. Then the second thing he's got to worry about, bang, is the butt of the stick. So let's assume that he doesn't get his hand smacked. He blocks the butt of the stick. Bang, he's got the flip to worry about now. Now, let's say he's having a good day. He blocks that, he blocks that, he blocks that. Boom, now he's got the disarm to worry about. Okay, so my point is, by the time this, and this all come into play, time you say 1001, thanks, Tom. It's like, again, taking a game of chess and going down to a game of checkers. So this is the reason why we implement the weapons. Number one, they're a training tool for us to expedite our attributes, to bring us to the point where we can get close to Bruce Lee's level. We need turbocharged way to train, and this is the turbocharged way. Let me take you over and show you a few of the weapons that we have available. Now, everything that I'm about to show you here is not just the weapon in and of itself, but it's to represent anything that you can hold in a street. Example, here, this is a staff. It doesn't have to be a staff. It could be a broom. It could be a pool cue. What do we have here? A heavy piece of wood that you cannot flail with one hand. So we call this dos manos, where you have to fight with dos, 2 hands on one weapon. Over here, we call this sinawali, because you have double sticks. Okay, when you have 2 equal lengths of something, this brings out a different type of movement. And if you can use this, it gives you a little bit of an advantage. If we move over to here, we have a stick in this hand, and we have a dagger in this hand. So we're cutting, we're slicing, and we're hitting. You need to understand that this could be a broken bottle. This could be the antenna of a car. Okay, everything is transposable. Now over here, we go to flexible weapons. It could be a belt, it could be a chain, it could be anything that literally moves. Nunchucks even. Finally, we have a stick. What does the stick represent? Anything that you can hold in your hand. A lamp, a chair, anything that you can grab, that's your stick. So it does not have to be a stick. Anything with one hand that you can flail. And last, and certainly not least, is a single dagger. Anything that you're slicing with. It's a slicing tool or a thrusting tool, as opposed to a stick, which is a hitting tool. Now, when you have each one of these weapons down, and you know how to fight with every weapon, then you are what I call a modern-day warrior. You could be thrown off in any alley in the world, bust a fence, grab a piece of wood, break off an antenna, break a bottle, and fight. Anything you can pick up, you'll be able to fight with. This is our goal. So hang with me. Now, as with the empty hands, we have a way of cheating with the weapons. If you look back to the empty hands, what is our main theme? What makes us so different, so special? Because we fight out of that very lethal range that very few people fight out of. Trapping range. This exposes your most lethal tools, your headbutt, your elbows, your knees. Well, we have the same little way of cheating when it comes to weaponry. Tom, most martial arts styles have blocks. And for every angle that comes in, they have a zillion blocks. But you just can't block that stick. It's just flailing too quickly. At the end of this stick, can move as fast as 120 miles an hour just by doing that. But my hand is not going very fast at all. So I'm going to give you the single most important concept that you'll ever understand if you're ever in a weapons fight. And that is, you smack the opponent's hand. Or as the Filipinos would say, you defang the snake. So when Tom comes with an angle 1, instead of me blocking, or again, Tom, or blocking, what I'm going to do is just simply, wham, just smack the hand. If he comes with an angle 2, I've got a zillion blocks from here too. I'm not going to do that. I don't see this as a weapon. Oh no, it's going to hurt me, I better block it. I say, it's a target. Give it to me. Bam! Thank you. So that's the key point. As soon as you smack the hand, regardless if it's a stick or if we're talking about a blade, it's the same thing. This is, I hate the word secret, but in lieu of any other word, it's the best one I have. This is the secret that's going to put you above every gang kid in the country. When two kids are out in an alley flailing at each other, they're just sitting here swinging at each other's face, just flailing at each other's face. What we want to do is we want Tom to come to my face because this knife has 3 feet to go. So as his knife goes 3 feet to my face, my knife goes 3 inches. So all I'm doing is perpetually moving around on my toes, and as soon as I see something, boom, boom, boom. All I'm doing, boom, is cutting every time. Immediately when you cut that hand, the knife is disarmed, and you can take the fight where you want. So again, if it's a stick, if it's a knife, if it's a brick, if it's a bottle, if it's a car antenna, if it's a 4x4, if it's a staff, that's not the point. You always smack the hand. And if you remember that concept, and if you follow the drills we're about to give you, you will be light years ahead of any other weapons person. Now, once again, our main principle that puts us ahead of most martial artists and street fighters when we talk about empty hand is that we pick a certain range to fight in. And this range is unfamiliar to these people. And that's what gives us the advantage. We have the same advantage with the weapons. Instead of getting in some posture or some low demonstrative stance and trying to block, as we've told you before, the weapon moves far too quick to try to block. Our major advantage is that we simply hit the hand. And if you have one person that's trying to hit a hand and one person that's doing the traditional way of weapon sparring, blocking and trying to hit, the ratio is 10 to 1. This person's got a 10 times better advantage. So what we do is every drill that we have, and there are literally hundreds of drills, are all predicated around the same mentality, and that is defang the snake. So when you see the weapon coming in, it's not looking at that weapon as it's an offensive tool that's going to hurt you, but it is a defensive. It is a target, and you want to hit it. You see that, and you go, good. And then we'll transpose that to empty hands. So what we want to do is we're going to take you first with one stick at a time, and then we're going to go through our knife, double stick, and we'll go through every weapon we have using the same principle. One principle, hit the hand. And if you can pick that up, again, you'll be light years ahead of anybody else. Okay, Tom, Tim, come on out. So real simple drill we have going on here. All Tom is going to do is smack the hand. Tim is going to be the feeder, and Tom is just simply going to smack the hand. Tim is going to hit feeding angles 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you watch Tom respond. It'll be self-explanatory. Okay, go ahead. Good, again, please. Great. Now, every single time that stick was hitting that glove, if it was hitting with a little more conviction, if the glove wasn't there, I promise you there's no way that man could have held on to that stick. That is the best disarm a person can do. And once he doesn't have a stick, and you have your stick, well, it's your game from then on out. So the major theme when you think of weapons, and I want you to get this in your head, and don't ever forget it. defang the snake. The last example we just saw had one stick facing a stick, and we had one person feeding the same basic 5 angles, and we had the other person hitting the hand. Now we're just simply going to exchange weapons. We're going to take a knife in lieu of the stick, but we're going to do the same thing. When somebody is swinging a knife at you, you don't try to block the knife. It's absurd. When you try to block a knife, and when you get your arm cut, and the tendons and ligaments are flopping all over the place, and your body is going into shock, you have absolutely no prayer of winning the rest of that fight. I don't care if it was a pillow fight. So people that say, I'd rather take it in my arm instead of my neck, well, they may be teaching you how to swim, but they've never been in the water. So instead of trying to put a passive arm up first and try to block and have your body go into instant shock 2 seconds after you get cut, I highly suggest that you put your knife in your front hand, and when that knife comes in, you simply cut his hand. His knife's dropped on the ground, and the worst thing he's got is a cut hand. Okay? Manami, Patrick, come on out. Now, the drill is going to be very simple. It's the exact same drill you just saw. The 2 diagonal angles, the 2 horizontal angles, and the thrust. The only difference is he's going to cut the arm every time. Okay? Feed Manami. That's a cut. That's a cut. Each time, this would be a disarm. Each time. Come back and feed now, Pat. You go. Cut, 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 cut. Good. Let me jump in here. Okay? Come in. Give me a cut, Manami. Go. That's about what it would look like. Okay? And then from there, it's his choice. So the concept, again, is defang the snake. I need you guys to work this drill at least an hour a day at home until you get it. Now we're going to get to the next phase of the game, and that is exchanging weapons. Let's say a knife against a stick. Off the top of your head, what would you think would be a better weapon to own? A hand grenade or a pocket knife? Well, generally, most people would say a hand grenade. And then I would say to them, great, let's go in the bathroom and fight then. So there is no superior weapon. You need to understand that. There's only distancing and timing. If you have the shorter weapon, your goal is to go in. If you have the longer weapon, your goal is to stay out. But regardless if you're going in or out, you're always cutting the hand. So in this particular drill, in this particular scenario, we're going to have Patrick with the knife and Manami with the stick. And he is going to be cutting his hand. And then we'll just reverse it. Okay, guys, come on out. Okay, same kind of feed again. Okay, go. Break. Beautiful. That was 9 out of 9. There's no way on earth anybody is going to survive a razor across the back of your hand, full force, and you're going to hold on to that stick. So the beauty of attacking the weapon, being offensive, and defanging the snake, you cannot put a price on that. Bruce gave that to us through Dan. Now we're ready for our next progression. The first concept that we learned was no blocking, no stances, just defang the snake. The second thing we did was we pitted every weapon against each other, and we did it in a largo mono fashion where one side feeds and the other side just simply learns to hit the hand. You have to do this at home for a minimum of 5 months. A minimum, an hour a day of 5 months, until it is ingrained in your head and it's a visceral response to cut that hand. And if you don't do that, and if you try to just spar before you get that response ingrained in you intuitively, what you're going to be doing is just arbitrarily flailing at this person like every gang kid in every alley in the world. So the very, very most important thing you need to do is get it ingrained in your head to defang the snake. Once your students defang the snake and they have that down, then you give them a little latitude and say, okay, have a little bit of fun now, spar. And that's about what we're going to do right now. But we're doing this in an accelerated progression. It would not be done this fast. This is just to stay within the confines of a 2-hour tape. Okay, fellas, come on out. Okay, You can put in the kicks. Ready? And begin. Time. Now, I want you to notice something. We just saw 15 seconds to 20 seconds go by and nothing connected. There was nothing hitting anything. Okay? If this were a boxing match, if this were a karate tournament, if this were a kickboxing match, if this were a Thai boxing match, if this were a Chi Sao tournament, there would be perpetual hitting all the time. The reason that you don't see that is because there's an emphasis placed on timing and an innate respect for the fact that that is a blade. And once you're used to a blade flailing in front of your face, when it comes time to empty hand, well, it's not quite as intimidating. And I want you to also notice that these guys are going for each other's hands because that's a touchdown. Okay, one more round, gentlemen. Okay, let's pick up the speed a little bit. Okay, go. Break. What this is going to give you after you've put in 10 to 20 hours of that kind of sparring, this is going to increase your footwork, your timing, your spatial relationship, and most important, your cat-like ability. That thing, that intangible thing that you have that teaches you to move like a cat, like a Sugar Ray Leonard. And that's some dumb boxer, hey, Rocky. And that's what I want. I want you up on your toes, and I want you to be like a rat, and I want you to feel, and I want you to have respect for what's in front of you. And that's what the blade gives you. First, we started off with the knife in your hand, making you aware that you need to cut the other person's hand, making you aware that you need to defang the snake. We did this drill for many, many, many hours. Then the next phase is to spar. And sparring, your main priority is to cut that hand. So we put bag gloves on the hands. Well, now we have to progress to the next level. That's the only way you get good. And the key to doing anything is progression. You have to go A, B, and C. The next level is anything goes. We have the headgear on. If you end up on the ground, you're on the ground. You go full contact, you can kick, you can do anything you want. And what you'll be gaining is you'll be gaining the experience, the feeling. You're learning how to deal with that adrenaline rush. You're learning how to deal with that confrontation when you meet somebody right up in your face with a knife flailing at your head. And once you've dealt with that concept over and over and over again through your training, when it comes time to go out in the street, just another day at the office. Okay, guys, come on out. Ready? And go. Break. Just stay right in the corner. I want you to look at something for the next round. I want you to notice that the main blocks that you see going on here are not blocks at all. You either see somebody getting out of the way with distance, or you see them attacking the limb. You don't see a block. You know why? Blocks don't work. Blocks never have worked. Blocks never will work. If blocks worked, you would see Muhammad Ali or Sugar Ray Leonard out there doing this. Okay? And you just never see that. And there's a reason. They're not economical. So what you're going to see here when these guys spar is you're seeing all of their attributes being turbocharged with that knife. including the adrenaline rush. You're not going to see one single block. Let's look at one more round. And break. Now, if there's ever a point in which you doubt any of the movement that you just saw there, what I recommend you do is get yourself an industrial magic marker and spar with it. And try to do some blocks that you see in books or in magazines or in other videos where they're having you do these suicidal blocks. Go ahead and try it. Get a magic marker and try that. You'll have lines up your groin, across your eyelids. Just give it a try. So, our next game is going to be taking it from the knives and moving it up to the sticks. Hang with me. Throughout this tape, we've been talking about sticks, we've been talking about 2x4s, we've been talking about knives, garrotes, machetes, but I would like you to actually know exactly what it is we're talking about. I need you to have an appreciation for these tools. Until you've actually felt a whack on the head with a stick or even seen what a knife could do, you really have no concept. And it's very important for me to change your perception, not just teach you techniques, but change your perception. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you what would happen to your arm if you get cut. I'm just going to give the piece of beef a few whacks, and I want you to take a nice long look at it. Just one simple shot. Now, as you notice, this was just the very first shot I did. This would be your arm.
Next up is Special Forces combat soldier Jack Stone. Okay, that's not his real name. In fact, I can't tell you much about this guy because he's requested that his identity be hidden. What I can tell you about him is this. He originally emerged from the U.S. Navy's Special Forces. His elite training made him first choice among the most clandestine Special Forces, an invisible ghost soldier who slipped behind enemy strongholds to eliminate selected bad guys. Stone's got 54 of those deadly missions under his belt. You won't ever hear about any of this either. All grisly, covert, dirty work that the U.S. government will not confirm. Let's just say I'm glad Jack Stone is on our side.
This next takeout is going to be your opponent is walking into a room or past a barrier of some sort or a pillar, and you are hiding behind it or underneath it or around it in some way where he's going to be able to walk by you. You don't know if he's got a gun, or if he is, he'll be holding it up in a certain position. This is a takeout from the side. So we'll say he's carrying a gun and he's coming in to clear a room. All right, you don't have much time on this. As generally, when a person walks into a room, they're going to try and clear the corners first. So as I see his gun point coming past the wall or barrier, I'm going to want to immediately charge. When I charge, I'm going to step in with my knife in my lead hand. I'm going to charge. As soon as I see that gun come past, charge, slicing the top of his arms, severing those tendons and muscles so he cannot pull that trigger. Once I have sliced both arms so that he cannot pull the trigger, you're going to reverse the knife and come into the throat, keeping that gun away, pushing it down or knocking it down in any way that you want. Let's do this up a little further. So we're gonna try this in real time. So he's coming past the corridor. I see the gun. Slice, slice. More time. As he's coming, I see his gun pass the corridor. Slice and slice.
know, there's been a lot said in a lot of different programs about knife fighting. Certainly there's a lot of fantastic experts out there. But you're talking about a Navy SEAL coming in here, and you learned these sentry stalking tactics in the SEALs program?
Yes.
Have you ever had to use these sentry stalking
Unfortunately,
things?
I have.
You have. So I'm going to let him talk just for a moment about the reality of a blade, a dagger, going across the top of somebody's arm or coming on the inside, and just how quickly and how easily that cuts the flesh.
You know, anytime you're dealing with a knife, a blade of any sort, doesn't really matter what it is, there's a constant danger, a constant hazard, not only to your opponent, but to yourself. Things just happen. Say you trip, you're in combat, you know, you go to cut somebody, you trip, fall, you ended up pointing the knife at yourself, cutting yourself, or what have you. So it's very important to understand the gravity of using a knife or having a knife in combat. It doesn't really matter who has it, but it's very important to be cautious about it. When you are attacking a person, it's important to know pretty much how sharp your blade is. Because if you want to come in to somebody and sever their tendons, a dull blade may cut through the top parts of the skin and some muscle, but you may not get the desired effect of severing those tendons and ligaments so that the hand will be inoperable. So it's important to understand how sharp your blade is, where to cut, and pretty much how much pressure to put on it.
You know, the reality of it is, if I can borrow that, first of all, if you've got a knife in combat and it's not sharp, you're an idiot to begin with, okay? If you carry a knife on your person, a pocket folder, obviously your knife should always be sharp, because the reason why you're carrying it, unless it's a tool for you, is because you may need it to save your life. So when that time comes. But when you take even average pressure and you put against something and pull back with a knife like that, you will sever that meat about probably 1 inch to 1.5 inches down into the meat. Now there's not 1.5 inches of meat there on my arm, which means it's not cutting meat anymore, it's cutting bones and, tendons and ligaments, which are controlling all those phalanges on the other end that are trying to hold on to a knife that may be opposing you. So this is the whole reason why they cut on the inside here. Not only are all of your arteries and your veins right in here so you'll bleed out, that might take 2 or 3 minutes, but we'd like to get the process started as soon as possible. But also as you pull and cut across, those tendons and stuff are going to render some of the functions of that arm pretty much useless. And that's
Generally
the reason why
at
they
the
do
hand.
that. Pardon me?
It'd be generally at the hand is what you want. You're not too interested in severing all the movement from the shoulder or the forearm. You want all the movement and power from the hand, so you cannot hold anything or possibly even clasp it to strike at you.
Even if the functionality remained by some miraculous point of occurrence when they cut there, once you cut there and that blood begins to ooze out down the end of your hand, I don't know how many of you ever had your whole arm stuck in blood. Maybe some of you have been a butcher. Hopefully you haven't had that experience in combat. But blood, try taking a can of oil and pouring the oil all over down the length of your arm, and then try to hold on to and use some kind of a weapon. A stick, a knife, damn near impossible. You can't even hardly hold on to it. A gun, you might be able to squeeze the trigger. You are not going to be precise. That thing is going to be very, very slippery. Blood, about the consistency of oil?
Oh yeah, very slippery.
It doesn't dry up very fast, especially when it's freshly coming out of somebody's cut arm.
Nope.
Knives are extremely dangerous, and you got to realize that it's not just your knife, it's a knife in the environment of a fight. It could slip out of your hand, it could be picked up by your perpetrator, it could be in his hand, and all of a sudden you're having to figure out how to disarm a knife rather than how to use it all that effectively. Be careful with these things, guys. Knives are just incredibly dangerous.